The Last with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. Billy Eichner is great. You're going to have a great time together. That's going to be
looking forward to it.
So we have two senators joining us tonight, Mark Warner and Sheldon Whitehouse, and someone who it looks like is going to be a senator next year, Roy Cooper, who's running in North Carolina. New assessments today, moving Senate races toward the Democrats in North Carolina, in Ohio, in Georgia, looking really good for the Democrats on Senate races.
It's really exciting. I mean, you and I talk about politics a lot. You got to watch and see what happens. But the movement is quite clear right now. Everybody thought the Senate was out of reach. Maybe not. Maybe not. It's looking pretty good.
And also, Jen, I'm going to hold this up. I want people to know about this book, Into the Wood Chipper. This is day one of publication of this book, and this is from an insider at USAID, a former official there, and revealing everything about the children who Elon Musk sent over there to destroy the life-saving work of USAID, and now hundreds of thousands of people have died because of that. But he describes those people who showed up, sent there by Elon Musk, as buffoons, and there are scenes described in this book about them and their ignorance that are, sadly, exactly what you expected from the outside.
I got to read that book. I was looking closer so I could see the title, but I will get the title. Such an important part of the story.
Into the wood chipper, as you remember.
Okay,
Elon Musk.
That's
what Musk said they were doing, is they were throwing the government into the wood chipper, and in effect, they did. It's a very, very important story. We're going to get to that this hour.
Looking forward to listening.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, we have breaking lying news tonight. The Vice President of the United States now says that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein hated each other. Here is video of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein just hating each other, can't stand each other, just dying to get away from each other at that party, just unbearable. Look at how much they hate each other. And we have an endless stream of photographs, more than we have time to show you, of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump just hating each other. And here's what Donald Trump said about Jeffrey Epstein in a 2002 profile of Jeffrey Epstein in New York Magazine. When offered the opportunity to express how much he hated him, he said, "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." And here is the now world-famous birthday card that Jeffrey Epstein received on his 50th birthday in 2003 with Donald Trump's signature. The birthday card says, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey." But it doesn't say that the thing that we have in common is that we hate each other. The last line of the birthday card above Donald Trump's signature is, "A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. Donald J. Trump." A pal is a wonderful thing. When's the last time you said that to someone you hate? Donald Trump has hated me for 15 years, ever since I started calling him a liar on this program when he first opened his mouth about President Obama's birth certificate. And in 15 years of hating me every day, Donald Trump has never sent me a birthday card. And I strongly doubt that Donald Trump has ever sent J.D. Vance a birthday card as loving as the one he sent to the man who said he was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years, Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump, and Donald Trump hated Jeffrey Epstein. This Democratic idea that somehow he was Epstein's best friend, that is a hoax.
That's how sad it is now to be vice president. That was James David Vance's desperate attempt today to defend Donald Trump in Georgia. And what you can see in J.D. Vance now is a politician trying to move with lead weights on his ankles, Trump lead weights, while handcuffed to Donald Trump. And J.D. Vance will never get those Trump handcuffs off, not for the rest of his life. J.D. Vance's entire political career is based on the public worship of Donald Trump after J.D. Vance compared Donald Trump to Hitler before J.D. Vance decided to become a Republican candidate for Senate. And now J.D. Vance's political future is disappearing before him as Donald Trump sinks ever lower in political polling, pulling the handcuffed J.D. Vance down with him. 64% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's war. The war that J.D. Vance just spectacularly failed to end by failing miserably and completely in his preposterously amateur version of peace negotiations with Iran. And a week ago, J.D. Vance disgraced himself and the vice presidency of the United States by following Donald Trump's orders to travel to a foreign country to campaign for the re-election of a prime minister of that country. That would have been an impeachable offense before the collapse of all principles and integrity in Washington's Republican Party. J.D. Vance humiliated himself on stage with Viktor Orban. And as if to prove to people, the people of Hungary, that he is just a puppet on Donald Trump's strings, J.D. Vance actually got Donald Trump on speakerphone on the campaign stage, where the President of the United States, for the first time in history, campaigned for the election of a foreign leader in a foreign country with his own voice, which would have been an impeachable offense prior to Donald Trump's complete corruption of the Republican Congress. And the big news, the joyous news that we had to report to you last night about that election is that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance lost, and lost as badly as was imaginable. Viktor Orban lost more decisively and by a greater margin than anyone predicted, which meant that J.D. Vance is the first American vice president to lose an election in a foreign country. And that should make it ever more clear to J.D. Vance himself and the Republican Party just how badly J.D. Vance will lose if he is the next Republican nominee for president. The big win for democracy in Hungary and the crushing defeat of Donald Trump's corrupt political interference in Hungary was not the only election loss for Donald Trump to report. Last night in Canada, 3 Liberal Party candidates won special elections to the Canadian Parliament, thereby solidifying the Liberal Party's full control of the Canadian government under Prime Minister Mark Carney. Prior to Donald Trump's attacks on Canada, prior to Donald Trump's deranged insults to Canada, prior to Donald Trump's publicly expressed demented desire to annex Canada to the United States and make it the 51st state, the Liberal Party was in deep, deep trouble in Canada. It was wobbling. The Conservative Party was on the rise. But then the Liberal Party rose up against the right-wing lunatic south of their border. And Canadians elected a publicly modest banker who had never run for office as the Liberal Party Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. And when Prime Minister Carney visited Donald Trump in the Oval Office, Donald Trump discovered that here was a foreign leader who had no intention of trying to flatter Donald Trump into some kind of working relationship. The Prime Minister's response to Donald Trump's trade war against Canada was to fight right back. And Canada is winning that trade war. The Prime Minister rallied the Liberal Party before the special election vote in a speech filled with thunderous applause and cheering for that mild-mannered man who never expected to be rallying Canada in opposition to the President of the United States of America. And when you listen in a moment to what the Prime Minister said, know that you are listening to the international sound of resistance to Donald Trump, and know that you are listening, in this case, to the sound of victory over Donald Trump, a sound that will be heard in this country. And listen to what that victory feels like in that audience of Canadians who never expected to be rising up against an American presidency. And listen to how the best neighbors a country could ever have, the most stable and loyal and friendly neighbors a country could ever have, Canadians. Listen to these Canadians. At the very mention of Donald Trump's state of Florida, which they used to love to visit.
This is not the time for politics as usual, for petty differences, for political point scoring. United, we will build Canada strong. A Canada for all, a Canada strong that no one can ever take away. I feel that strength. I feel that strength in this room. I feel that strength. I feel that strength. As Diana mentioned, we feel that strength across this great country. At this decisive moment, Canadians are demonstrating just how strong we are. You know, it started quietly. People choosing a wine from the Okanagan over one from California. Anyone had any bourbon recently? No, I don't think so, no. Sorry. A family planning a vacation to Prince Edward Island instead of booking flights to Florida. Small individual acts of solidarity, but repeated millions of times. And together, they make a statement. We are the masters of our destiny.
Small individual acts of solidarity, repeated millions of times. That is what it will take. That's what it will take to beat Trumpism in the next congressional election and in the next presidential election. That's what can happen here. Small individual acts of solidarity, repeated millions of times. That wasn't Hungary we were watching just then. That is Canada. If Canadians can do it, this country can and should do it. The international sound of resistance to Donald Trump was heard in the British House of Commons. And the language used to describe Donald Trump was on a par with the language Winston Churchill used to describe Adolf Hitler during World War II.
Hitler is a monster of wickedness.
A monster of wickedness. Words to describe the worst, most murderous dictator in European history and world history. And yesterday, in the British Parliament, the words, "He is a dangerous and corrupt gangster," were used to describe the President of the United States, an office once occupied by the president who beat Adolf Hitler in World War II. The leader of the free world is a phrase invented during the television age and applied by the American news media to the President of the United States, while most of the rest of the world didn't quite see it that way. The phrase was always a fiction, falsely suggesting that the world could be led by anyone, or even half the world, the so-called free world, could be led. The American news media that so mindlessly used that term for all of Donald Trump's lifetime has, unconsciously, I presume, dropped it. When is the last time you heard Donald Trump referred to as the leader of the free world? No one in the news media could possibly use that phrase about him now. The news media that so overdid that phrase has mercifully dropped it without ever having had a meeting about, hey, let's not use that phrase anymore. It just disappeared. It's just so obvious to everyone, including everyone in the news media, that Donald Trump is not even a leader of his own country. And so the phrase has disappeared, leader of the free world. It has just disappeared from recent usage, but it was revived yesterday on the floor of the House of Commons, only to rip it away from Donald Trump. Edward Davey is the leader of the Liberal Democrats in Parliament, and he rose yesterday to say this.
A whole civilization will die tonight. Words I never thought I would hear from an American president. And though Donald Trump thankfully didn't follow through this time, these words are a stark reminder of how reckless, immoral, and completely outside the bounds of international law this president is. Regrettably, he is no friend of the United Kingdom. He's no leader of the free world. He is a dangerous and corrupt gangster, and that is how we must treat him.
A dangerous and corrupt gangster. That will no doubt be the title of at least one biography of Donald Trump, probably by a British historian. That is the kind of description of Donald Trump that will live in history because of where it was given, because of when it was given, and because of the otherwise positive history, centuries of positive history between presidents of the United States and the British Parliament. Presidents of the United States, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II, were treated as heroes by the British Parliament. Heroes. And now the President of the United States can be called a dangerous and corrupt gangster in Parliament, and no one shouts that down. No one disagrees. And that is how we must treat him, says Edward Davey, and no one disagrees with that. Edward Davey described Donald Trump's latest fit of madness in his war in Iran.
And when it comes to Trump's latest cunning plan to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, that will only escalate this crisis and jeopardize the precarious ceasefire. So it's right that the UK is not joining Trump. And I welcome the Prime Minister convening a summit to offer an alternative to Trump's. We must work with our reliable allies in Europe and the Commonwealth and our partners in the Gulf to bring this conflict to an end and keep open the Strait of Hormuz. That is critical for tackling the cost of living crisis that is getting worse and worse.
And so the American president is now a problem that has to be solved by the British government and other European governments. Donald Trump's war on Iran has now become a war for control of the Strait of Hormuz, and Donald Trump is losing. Donald Trump is also losing elections he interferes in Hungary, and Donald Trump is strengthening the victories of the Liberal Party in Canada that stands in united opposition to Donald Trump and Trumpism. Opposition to Donald Trump, who was indeed Jeffrey Epstein's closest friend for 10 years and is now the world's most dangerous and corrupt gangster. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He is the Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Chairman. What is the status tonight in the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, first of all, I would love to rebut what you just said. But the unfortunate thing is what you said is accurate. You know, in full acknowledgement, my grandparents on my mother's side were Canadian. It's hard to piss off the Canadians. Mm-hmm. And we have destroyed that relationship where Mark Carney, who was a great prime minister, has said China may be a more dependable friend than the United States. The UK, who's been our strongest partner for not decades, but centuries. The comments they're making about Donald Trump, what this man is doing, you know, to our reputation. And remember, America's strength is not just our economic power. It's not our military power. It's the fact that we had friends and allies, and we were destroying those allies in a way that's unprecedented, Lawrence. So when we go to Iran, we now have a circumstance where this president said there were 4 goals ultimately: regime change. The regime now is worse than before. Getting rid of the enriched uranium would take 10,000 troops on the ground and guarding a perimeter that the Iranian could shoot at. Ballistic missiles, they still have, obviously, capabilities. They shot down some of our planes. And Lawrence, the thing that just makes me crazy is the Ukrainians, Vladimir, Zelensky offered us all of their anti-drone technology that they have perfected, and we turned them down. And Donald Trump says, we have beaten Iran. They control the Strait of Hormuz. They have hundreds of speedboats that they can put mines and bombs. And the idea that somehow America is going to blockade the southern end of the strait, we are now looking, not my words, but the worst energy crisis in our lifetimes. I'm old enough to remember the oil shock of 1973, that gas prices will not come down shortly. The natural gas, the fertilizer costs, the fact that many Asian nations are shutting down their economies one day a week because they can't get access to this oil means everything we buy will go up. This man who promised us no foreign wars and better affordability has been the opposite. And as you said, he is, and Lawrence, the thing that, I have great pride in our country, but this man destroys our country's reputation on Easter Sunday to curse the way he did, to say he's going to destroy the Iranian civilization. And then more recently, they're like, oh my God, you can't make this stuff up, to suddenly say he's going to, take on the Pope and then put himself out in a figure as a messianic Jesus. My God, this stuff, Lawrence, 2 years ago, this would have been rejected for a Saturday Night Live skit because it would be too outrageous to believe.
Senator, what are you looking for in the Intelligence Committee now in terms of Iran's capacity to just hold out, which is all they have to do? Victory on their side is simply being able to hold out against the United States. What's their capacity to do that?
Lawrence, we have spent 100,000 sorties against them. We have bombed them. But anybody in history would know you cannot bomb an adversary into submission. And the idea that Donald Trump says he didn't know that they would close the Strait of Hormuz or go after our Gulf allies is either willful ignorance or a bunch of intel leaders who are not telling the truth. So the unfortunate thing, and I love our country and I believe in our values, but in so many ways, 46 days in, America is less strong. And the Iranian regime, which is, by the way, more radical than it was before, can, on some level of truth, say, we just took on America and Israel and fought them to a tie, although maybe even more than a tie. They have ballistic missile capabilities. They have closed the strait. Their regime is more radical. And I can just say, as I mentioned earlier, if we were to go after their enriched uranium, it would take 10,000 soldiers guarding a perimeter for days, and then we are going to send our special operators in, and the Iranians could bomb that. I've been across Virginia countless times in the last few days. I've said, how many of you are willing to put your sons or daughters or grandchildren on the ground in Iran to fight this war? And all of this was knowable. It's not just, this is not just political. This is like who we are as a nation, who we are as a world leader, and how we have actually made America and our allies weaker in that region 47 days in. And there is no easy exit for anyone. Even if he declares, victory tomorrow, the energy crisis, do not take my word. Look at anybody, gas, natural gas, jet fuel, fertilizer, aluminum. this will be with us for not weeks, but months and potentially years. And a president that promised no foreign wars and less prices, it's why the rest of the country is turning against us. And what you did so brilliantly, and it makes me just, my heart sick, is looking at how we are viewed around the world. We have spent 75 years trying to say, with all our flaws, and God knows we've got a lot of flaws, we were the good guys. We don't have that claim anymore.
Senator Mark Warner, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, when asked if gas prices would come down before the elections, Donald Trump said they might go up. North Carolina's former governor is trying to take a North Carolina Senate seat away from Republicans in the next election, and polls are showing gains for Democrats in Senate campaigns. Former North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, now Senate candidate, will join us next. North Carolina's former Republican governor, Pat McCrory, said that Donald Trump has created total chaos for Republicans.
I think the biggest conflict is the economy. As a result of the war, and even before the war, we had issues of the economy here in North Carolina, and that's why this could be a switch state for the Republicans moving to the Democratic side of the aisle. The administration's doing a very poor job in that area, and yes, that's going to impact the midterms, especially every time you fill up your gas tank. Now, a lot of things can happen between now and November, which could completely reverse it, but right now there is just total chaos.
And Donald Trump adds to that chaos every day with comments like this.
So do you believe the price of oil and gas will be lower before the midterm elections?
I hope so. I mean, I think so. It could be. It could be or the same or maybe a little bit higher, but it should be around the same.
Joining us now is former North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. He is the Democratic nominee for United States Senate in North Carolina. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Governor. Is there anything you want to disagree with in former Republican Governor Pat McCrory's comments about the total chaos for Republicans created by Donald Trump?
I think he's talking with the same people that I'm talking with in North Carolina. I talked to a man in Scotland County, rural eastern North Carolina town, who has to drive a long commute, paying $60 to fill up his gas tank. That's a lot. We know that people are getting hit hard with grocery prices and utility prices, and they just want change. We've got a lot of momentum right now, but we have to keep our eye on the ball. I've been around politics in North Carolina for a long time, and I know that this is going to be a tough race. We're going to need people's help. We want them to go to roycooper.com and make sure that we've got the resources to win this race and get it across the finish line.
And Republicans are now pouring massive amounts of money into North Carolina to try to stop you because they see you, Washington Republicans see you as the candidacy that could tip control of the Senate to the Democrats.
Well, my opponent, Michael Whatley, has lobbied for years in Washington for utility companies and for big oil, and they're all coming to his rescue. There are going to be hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to come into North Carolina against me. But we are ready for this because we have the message that we want to make stuff cost less. And I've been going all over the state, rolling out our policies on how we want to reduce the cost of gas and groceries and utilities and childcare and housing. Pender is suffering right now as a farmer from tariffs that this administration has put on him. John, who owns a small business and lives in a home in the mountains, is getting hit with higher utility bills in both places. Meredith is worried about her child, Vivian, who has cerebral palsy, and she's scared to death that all of these attacks on health care from Washington are going to take her Medicaid away. We know that people want a change. They're tired of what's happening in Washington. I feel it across North Carolina, but we know in this state that we haven't done well electing Democrats. We've only had 2 Democrats in almost 40 years elected to the Senate. And the current Republican Senator, Tom Tillis, won twice, but never led and had a statistical lead in a public poll the entire time he ran both elections. So Democrats often are ahead until they're not. And we just need to make sure that we get in there and finish just this job. We need people's help. We need them to volunteer. This is such an important time for our country, and we need to make stuff cost less across the board.
Thanks for that warning on North Carolina polls. Senate candidate Roy Cooper, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
And coming up, big surprise, the only president ever convicted of 34 felonies wants to pardon everyone who works for him now, as we predicted he would at the beginning of this presidential term. That's next with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. As predicted here at the beginning of this presidential term, Donald Trump is now reportedly promising to pardon everyone who works for him. And of course he is. Under the headline, Trump promises mass pardons to staff before leaving office, the Wall Street Journal reports that Donald Trump said, "I'll pardon everyone who has come within 200 feet of the Oval." Another person who met with Trump earlier this year said the president quipped about pardoning anyone who had come within 10 feet. In one conversation with advisors in the dining room next to the Oval Office last year, Trump said he would host a news conference and announce mass pardons before he left office. Several aides said Trump raises the pardons so regularly that some of his advisors now laugh about it. The president has repeatedly raised the specter of pardons with White House aides and other administration officials, particularly when staff have suggested they could face prosecution or congressional investigations over decisions. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. Senator, mass pardons for all, which felt easily predictable at the beginning of this presidential term.
Fine minutes. It calls to mind the legal phrase consciousness of guilt. And I think it reflects 2 things that are spiraling here. One is that the corruption out of this Oval Office is so extreme right now that you'd have to be blind, even as a staff person, not to be aware of it. The various crypto schemes and the ways in which the Trump family is making money. Who knows what deals they're trying to cut with the Russians in those negotiations. All of that creates a real danger to staff people. And the second part of this is that Trump really seems to be psychologically, mentally decompensating a bit. And his decisions get more dangerous, they get more rash. And that, I think, frightens staff also, that he'll ask them to do things that are plainly illegal. And so these 2 pressures of all the corruption and of his mental decompensation, I think probably are creating a lot of pressure around the staff. And that's why he has to constantly reassure them, don't worry, I'll pardon you, I'll pardon you, I'll pardon you, which I don't think has been a conversation in past Oval Offices. It's almost stunning that it's there. You know, John McCain was a friend of mine, and he used to say about Russia, Russia is a gas station run by gangsters that have an army. And this whole operation being run by Trump is basically trying to turn our beloved country, our, sea to shining sea, good with brotherhood country, into a gas station run by gangsters that has an army. And if I were on his team, I would be wanting to build every defense that I could, because I do think that he's getting his people into real danger, legal danger.
Well, we saw the Supreme Court give Donald Trump a preemptory pardon for anything he does virtually if he's doing it in the White House. It's all he really has to do is just have your criminal meeting in the White House. And this Supreme Court says that's a government function that we cannot interfere with. He has total immunity, but that just took care of him. It didn't take care of anybody else in the White House. And so he's going to get in there with possible criminal intent authorized by the Supreme Court. And of course, he has to then, in his Supreme Court way, promise pardons to everybody if he's going to be suggesting criminal activity.
Yeah, he has to sprinkle pardons around like fairy dust to keep people loyal and keep people around. If you were Al Capone running Chicago, you'd probably want your henchmen to be pardoned too. It's just part of the gangster mentality of this administration. But there've got to be people over there who are not full-on gangster and are worried about what their future holds for them. I wouldn't be surprised if there were people who are starting to lawyer up just to have somebody, to talk to make sure that they've got their own legal defenses in place and that they know where they need to pull the ripcord and get the hell out of there.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, however bad you thought Elon Musk's takeover of the United States Agency for International Development was, it was actually worse on the inside. Nicholas Enrich was there. He was inside at USAID. He saw them. He saw the Elon Musk children come in to destroy the work of that institution. He has described it in his new book titled Into the Wood Chipper. This is as important a book as we will discuss on this program this year. Nicholas Enrich will join us next. More than a year ago, Nicholas Enrich, who at the time was an official at the United States Agency for International Development, wrote an internal memo warning about the consequences of Donald Trump and Elon Musk stopping foreign aid for global health programs. The memo warned that could lead to nearly 18 million additional malaria cases, 200,000 new polio cases, and millions of women and children cut off from basic health care needs. 13 months later, Nicholas Enrich says that more than 750,000 people have died, most of them children, as a result of Donald Trump and Elon Musk's destruction of USAID. In his new book, Into the Wood Chipper, a whistleblower's account of how the Trump administration shredded USAID, Nicholas Enrich describes a meeting with Joel Borchert and Ken Jackson, two of the people Donald Trump appointed to oversee the destruction of the United States Agency for International Development. He writes, I began to describe various life-saving components of USAID's global health portfolio, highlighting how we prepare for and respond to emerging pandemic threats, support the diagnosis and treatment of tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV, and immunize millions of children from the deadliest childhood diseases. I spoke for about 5 minutes, focusing primarily on our infectious diseases work and hoping to keep the attention of people who seemed to have no experience or interest in global health. When I finished, the room was silent, the political appointees looking at one another in what appeared to be disbelief. The silence was broken by Ken Jackson, who chuckled softly and shook his head. Wow, there really is so much that USAID does that we never knew, he said. This is the story that needs to get out there. Joel, also smiling, chimed in next, echoing Jackson's amazement. I had no idea you did this, he said. As a Republican, when I think of USAID, what it does in global health, I assumed it was just, abortions. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Joining us now is Nicholas Enrich, former acting assistant administrator for global health at the United States Agency for International Development. His new book, important book, Into the Wood Chipper, a whistleblower's account of how the Trump administration shredded USAID, is available today. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Thank you for the important work you did at USAID. Thank you for delivering this book, which tells us the story that is just so stunning and does fill in what I was actually supposing from the outside. I heard you describe on Morning Joe this morning the people who came into the agency from the Trump administration. You said you could divide them into those who were cruel and those who were buffoons. And that's the only possible explanation I could come up with watching it from out here about what they were doing.
Yeah, that's correct. I think especially the Doge side of things, we were mostly dealing with what I referred to as buffoons. They were uninformed, they were unqualified, they came in on a mission to destroy the agency without having any idea what it did. That example that our chief of staff of the whole agency, when he didn't know what USAID did in global health, he thought that the only thing we did was abortions, which just goes to show how ignorant the leadership was of the agency that they were trying to destroy.
The grim outcome of what occurred was entirely predictable. We knew, anyone who's been to any of these countries that USAID serves has seen it in action. I've seen it in action in Africa. I've seen the lives saved right there at the local clinic with babies being brought in and being treated that never would have been treated any other way. It was all so predictable how deadly this would be.
Right. As you mentioned, over 750,000 people have already died. And again, it's important to note that those are unnecessary deaths. They would not have died if USAID had still existed. But I think it's just a large number. But when you think about the individual families that were involved, when you think about mothers or pregnant women who are unable to access emergency childbirth services because clinics were closed, or families who had to choose between which of their children to feed because USAID's food supplements were no longer available to them. It's those, multiply those stories by hundreds of thousands, and then we start to see what that impact really looks like around the world.
Nicholas Enrich, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to want you to come back to discuss more detail of this. This important new book is titled Into the Wood Chipper, a whistleblower's account of how the Trump administration shredded USAID. This is the cruelest thing, the specifically cruelest thing that Donald Trump and Elon Musk did together. We'll be right back. Nicholas Enrich, important new book is called Into the Wood Chipper. It tells the worst story about Donald Trump and Elon Musk working together. This condemnation will live in history against Donald Trump forever.